Here, we may have some others joining us. There's a couple that have come for different sessions of this, and we actually had about 20, so we have obviously 16 right now, or 17 with Dave. So some of them were some of the other specialists, like Paul Osmond, who came in, or different individuals from the Corps. So this is mainly the big group. There's a couple that will come in, and we'll either fit them into an existing group, if there's not enough, or we'll spin off another group as we move forward. So again, thanks you all for joining us all, and I'm going to turn it over to Fred and let him kind of lead the process. You all got an agenda in advance. There's Dave. Dave, why don't you come on down here, and that way we'll fill up the tables as they go. I'll grab, I think you have a name tag on this table somewhere. Yep. There we go. Perfect. Why don't you fill in that one down there so we'll get 4 at each of the tables. I think everybody may know each other. You'll have a chance to kind of introduce yourself here, Paul. See if any of these other guys should come here based on schedule. Again, we sent the agenda out last week. This is a chance for all of you to speak, talking in the group. I think it's more productive. I think everybody agreed more productive. We do these in small groups and then report out. I'm going to give each table maybe a couple before I turn it over to Fred. Somebody, if you may want to designate someone to kind of be the note taker, you can decide, arm wrestle for it, whatever. There you go. There's a speech question has, and I'll give you a few more if you want to. Then you got to do that.
I was gonna say, so.
You might have enough for 4 at each table. Here we go. This is just an extra one. And there's an extra one for this table as well. So a place where you could write the answers in if you want. And then whoever you designate to report out to the group when you're finished with the discussion. We're going to try to keep this moving forward. Our city administrator and or director of public works. One of the things I added just a little bit of kind of what the agenda is. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But the last one is timetable and potential steps in decision-making chronology. What happens? How do we move this forward? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fred. So
Great, thank you, Mayor. All right, so the previous sessions, we provided a lot of information to you. This session is all about you, giving information back. Okay? As we mentioned the last session, what we want to hear from you is what kind of things do you want to see studied? But before we start that, we thought it would be valuable for you to take a few minutes and talk about what have you learned from these previous sessions with all the information you got. What kind of perspectives did you come with that maybe has changed now since you heard the speakers talking about what we have to deal with? Did you have some kind of perspective or certain ideas in mind that after hearing that, you've changed it, altered it? We'd like to hear about that. So we're going to do maybe about 10-15 minutes on that, and then we're going to report out on it. Next step then, we'll take a little bit more time, and we want to hear from you as to what are the things that you think we need to study. Okay? So we're very interested in what are those things, and you've got some areas to take notes. We'd like you to at least leave a sheet per table behind so we can capture those kind of things. So this is the big picture stuff. What are the things that you think we need to study?
And Fred, if we may add, also, the priorities that we talked about, are they the same? Are there more? Is it changed? We need that, that's part of that session about the priorities and what we want to study.
Thank you. Then we'll report out on that. Then knowing that that's going to take some amount of time to get this study done, what are some things that we need to consider doing in the interim? Those are the near-term ideas. All right, we'll spend some time talking about those. And then, as the mayor said, what are your expectations about moving forward? I know we've heard some of those in previous sessions, but it'd be good to capture those. And moving this thing forward, what's your expectations? And then, as the mayor said, we'll follow it up with a chronology of events. How's this thing, what's the process and timeline to move this all forward? Is that good with everybody? Are we clear? All right,
How long
so,
will we have to do wrap up?
pardon me?
How long, well, we're gonna do all of these, and then we'll do a fairly long wrap up? How quickly do we move through each one of these?
We're gonna do wrap-ups after each step.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I have short-term memory loss, I forget. So let's take about 10 minutes or so on this first one. What did you learn? What ideas or perspectives have changed? Or some new thoughts that you got as a result of the previous sessions? And then we'll report out. Yes?
And this may be a question maybe I'm just missing, or maybe myself I just need clarification on. But it might help me to answer these questions a little bit, and fabulous discussion, if I was to understand a little bit better about what we're looking the task force to achieve. What are we looking to get out of this? Is this for us to present ideas and the ideas we put together and present to somebody? What is our end goal here?
The initial idea for this task force was to gather folks from a wide range of the community and talk about the issues. And what it evolved to was your desire to have input into this study. Because a lot of what we talked about, we're not the experts. We need to bring some experts in to study the issues that we present. So the things that you present in this step 2 and step 3 will be very significant in how this thing moves forward and what happens with it. Okay? Like, for example, for myself, I just thought you could put a wall up and everything's cool, right? I didn't realize how much it goes under. I didn't know River Drive came up. I didn't know you had to, and the sewer. Geez, it's a lot more complex than I envisioned. Okay? You do one thing and it's like whack-a-mole, something else pops up. So, those are the kind of things that we want to address. And we want your input. The task force input is very important to what happens.
As to what the study might be focused on.
Exactly.
And our priorities as we move forward.
Correct. So that's, step 2 is, we identify priorities in the first meeting. Are they still sound? Or did our perspectives change on that? And then, yes, what do you all think we need to have studied? And that's a big effort, and it's gonna be a longer-term project. And the next step is, while that's all going on, what are some things we can do short-term?
Fred, could I add one other quick thing very quickly? And I would just say, the end thing here is you're going to, as a group of citizens, give direction to the city staff in particular, and subsequently the council, as to these are the things that need to be included. Now wrap all that together and study that for us and come back with some sort of a direction. So we need to hear that from you, because we've heard a lot of things that have evolved over our discussions. We need to kind of clarify those and let you give your feedback to it now. Okay?
Yeah, so it's your chance to go, oh, that's all good, but what about this? I really think we need to consider this, because that directly affects my area. Okay? All right, and let's
So you're prepared to outline the weird everything else presented for
Well, let's also think all the way back to that first meeting. We sat down and kind of looked at this priorities. Personally, my business is not a personally, I didn't think it was a priority to the organization, particularly if they switch two-way traffic. But I've since I've come around, because I wouldn't think, I was thinking selfishly about being my business, but there's a whole other business down the village who were in effect shut down. Where the private goes, the majority of their traffic comes off of the drive, not through development.
That's what I was wondering too, like doodle.
Not down.
I liked it.
decide what we're going to do. I don't think
Yeah, I believe so.
realistically,
Above market.
the steps are put in
Dan,
place.
can you hear the discussion?
And the village, you know, the budget, all of that.
Thank you.
I don't think there's in place a plan, as you were saying, to maybe get to the places that you need to get to because of the lapse of time. But it has to be more than
Vendor
one
floods,
step.
each one of these come
There has to be
together.
layers
And that's whole.
of what it is, and who's going to do it.
So I think personally, that's something that, you know, I have change that I think
It's like the same as me.
Once it's calmed down, this one's considered.
also learning that, you know, they will be facing 27 at any given time.
That's why.
How was Jigger's first day?
So I think that was highlighted, knowing that, you know, so that's potential. Of course, we already know that this plan should be applicable, so I think those, you know, although they're priorities, we talked about that.
There's a lot going on.
So we heard some of the experts speak, where we could potentially land in terms of real threats. I think,
I agree, but
document that
wholeheartedly.
from my perspective, that's something.
What you do here is going to affect what you do down here. Somebody's going to do a lot of study to figure out cause and effect.
But I think it also needs to be because it is easier.
Well, I think you have to put together the whole thing. And then go through.
Well,
That's the question.
This is not one plan, it's a 5 year plan. This is right now, it's a 6 month.
And if we agree with
Every year, you need to put the plans later.
that's what I wanted everybody, the 100-year flood is 2040.
Information is very it's constant. They make these
Floods that are about 80 years.
interesting comment that was made that the river is no longer a river, but a continent.
And if we,
I think just what it is.
yeah, if it had been the perfect storm, if it had been the perfect storm, we got that 6 inches of rain right before 5.2, and the snow melt all came at once. God help us.
Well, I think so.
Long those over. Study.
We know it's happening. It's happening from severe rain. 75%. What happened in Mississippi?
I agree.
I think those are definitely.
We can improve on what we do now. Oh, yes, yes.
And that's what you just talked about. And I think that's what the public is, and so there's land residents would like to see.
Oh, I guess.
This is the short term.
Puts it about 5 inches. No, I want to represent what's the 100 years, 200 years, and 500 years.
That's what I saw.
That's how the core is. And the 50 year, 20 years.
But even with that information, you still got layers or steps that you're gonna get.
I think the other thing that's,
Not
I think I
only
agree
downtown, it's gonna have to go stores that are focused on the river. They're gonna have to be part of this
you can
plan.
put walls up and stuff.
So,
Yeah.
we're starting to use that or the clay.
We actually experienced that.
Is it another way?
We had our buildings
Put it
burned
up
down
and something.
and, didn't have them set up.
Garage still, solid frame.
That rain.
Is it
And
not?
that water came out, cleaned it up, right back in.
There's a lot of things that
I knew the previous one,
there's a clothing industry.
when he opened the tap.
That's, look, it could be done, that's,
Look at the, it's called, it balances out.
it's just not something that can happen for today.
Right, and it's also something that has.
No, we fight. In fact, it's part of our, part of the. Deals, every year we fight.
So I think all that is.
We monitor our sewer. What happens?
But I think
And then everything rises up, it's like ceiling in the basement. We actually, monitor the level of the sewage inside.
Yeah, well, right. And, but the idea is that surprises me because it wasn't surprising.
Because
The backflow preventer.
yeah,
But if you're not there, you gotta rush down there.
Potentially damage, even though it could hopefully never happen.
but that's what we have to monitor. And we can get to normally, almost in the rain, we get to around 95 feet. This year,
There might be a little bit of.
we're behind that. We don't get to go along.
After 93, Rebecca will battle.
And then that deluge, immediately started to get the sewage back up.
93 wasn't back in bed. It's close. Right there. Keep getting it. So bigger floods are not very hard to imagine. But I think the public can do a shot. This is probably
Right. You know, ours is.
That's the one they're under orders. It's a brick. And it like,
flood that was saved
this year especially.
10 times and not a problem, and all of a sudden it came in 10 foot higher.
They had to put yours
And nobody had anything.
Anyway, I guess I should mention the last one that we learned.
I wrote up an 8 thing, so I just started, copy them off.
What a crap.
I think it's a
How are you? Yeah.
But I think that.
Oh, really?
So when it cuts off,
I don't want to.
that's,
Oh, wait, that might be right then. Oh, I don't have, yeah.
Dave, you got anything?
Extra challenge.
Would you like to have this? So, you might give them a heads up.
Sure.
You say it's the board loads of
I thought because I walked in.
Of the railroad, because it gets in the way we're gonna worry about some kind of flood protection on the other side of the track. Well, then we walk away from the railroad, we walk away from whatever monies that are potentially available to us from the railroad to help protect the house. And it seems like whatever we do is gonna be very, very expensive. And we can't determine the one, a big tax bill. We have to, we have to know that we can do something that's going to stop the tracks from getting flooded again. And something getting flooded again. And we make significant additional resources available. And that's something that we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, let's go around and have somebody report out. What are some of the things that you've learned, your perspective changed on? And let's start over here, please.
I'll describe. So, we had about 6 points. The scope has changed, so the benchmark isn't the last flood. We need to look ahead of the weather pattern, more floods expected, and they're expected to be worse. Wastewater systems vulnerability and the connection between the flood and the sewer system and the regional impact that happens with that. Those news. What we do or others do affects us all, so we're interrelated. The Nahant Marsh was a good example and of what can be done to retain some water, and more like it can be used up and down the river. It's going to require a multifaceted solution, and transportation corridors are an important element to consider.
Great.
Those were the points that we were raising.
Any? Thank you, Paul. Okay, next, please.
We had three. The first is that the change in the frequency and severity of the floods is something that needs to be considered in any planning that we do. We also learned about how important the amount of backside underground flooding with the storm sewers, how that has to be addressed, especially if we want to keep River Drive open. And then we also came to a realization that there are different parts of the riverfront throughout Davenport. We probably need to section those sections off and then have a different plan for each of those sections.
Okay.
That's what we have.
Okay. Any more comments from the table? Also, any questions from anybody else about those? All right, thank you. Next, please.
Okay, ours were, first, that River Drive being open is kind of moved up in priority. Not sure where you would go from here to here or whatever, but not necessarily because the business is on River Drive, but for the businesses, in the village, where, because their traffic comes from River Drive, that 27.5-foot floods are not out of the question, as well as, haven't yet seen the 100-year flood here. Didn't realize as threatened as the sewer plant and the water plant were. Everything that's done impacts something else, and then that climate change has been proven by the data, and but it's also using development and land use that all play a part too, so it's not an easy solution.
Okay. Any supporting comments?
Sums it up.
Question? All right,
Okay,
next please.
we had 5 items. One is the current flood plan is inadequate, need to have better short-term and long-term plan. Second one, the protection is more complicated because of the storm sewer system. City desires protection for the entire 9-mile riverfront, that was news. The flood risk is higher than previously thought, and an action is urgently needed. And there are technical solutions available that can reduce flood risk.
Okay, good. Any other comments, questions?
Can I ask just a quick one maybe for the group? One of the things that I heard that was very interesting by one of our experts that came in is determine what we want the city to look like and then flood protect it versus focusing on flood protection and then what's left, we try to make it look nice. Do you see a world-class riverfront fitting into the plans that you all talked about? In some form?
Yes.
I don't want to, individually, but I'm just curious, because that's one thing I think that I know a lot of us would like to see. I think that it's not just, it's well flood protected, but it doesn't look very nice. You want it to be that world-class riverfront, and we use all the techniques, everything you've said, to be able to then flood protect that as well.
Well, I think, that's why I think it's a little bit of a loaded question, right? Yes, we'd all love to see a world-class riverfront. The question is, does it need to be flood protected? Can we have a world-class riverfront that can also consume floodwaters during a flood period, and then we hose it down when we're done and we're back in business, right? So that would be my thought on that, Frank.
Yeah, well, I'm there too, but
Yeah, okay.
I think it's a matter of having a world-class riverfront doesn't mean it can't absorb some water.
Yeah, right.
I don't know,
I
Michelle,
would
did
say
you?
that the recognition though that whether the choice is one or the other, it's still going to have a huge amount of expenditure. And whichever the choice, the direction, or what we choose to study is going to also have to be return that investment. But I think what we're looking at is there's a large investment. I would like people to recognize that, flood wall has this big dollar tag on it, but we think it's gonna solve everything. At the same time, we're learning that there are other solutions to keep that world-class riverfront open, but it's still gonna require probably pretty much a similar investment. So, we're looking for that as also as a return on what that return on the investment is.
Did you have a comment?
No, I just agree. I mean, what I heard you say is we could say, let's build a wall all along, and it could be very, very expensive, or these very delicate decisions could also, it's gonna be expensive, whichever way we do, for sure, so.
If I may add a comment too, I think it may change the landscape of what you see downtown. And some who are better history than I, Chicago raised their grade, I think it was 5 or so feet back in the early 1900s. And if you take a look at Cincinnati, since I was just down there, their whole riverfront accepts water, but there are not businesses down there within that area. So in order to get to that, there's gonna be some give and take of, and things may look slightly different than we see them today, so.
If I might say though, it seems to me in looking at the history of Davenport, the city made the decision to remove buildings already. They did that, we did that already. We said, we'll take them off the riverfront, we'll take off the factories where Centennial Park is. That was all business, that was all buildings. I'm not sure we're ready to take down more buildings downtown. I certainly am not, feel like that's something we should do, because I think the city did retreat. And I think the lesson is, climate keeps changing, it retreated, it dealt with it for 20, 30 years, and now we have another challenge. So I don't know if taking more buildings down is necessarily something I would, like to see.
Wash them out.
Yeah, right. But, like the Figgy, we build a Figgy, which the basement floods, the parking lot floods, that's how that's built. But what do we do about the heritage assets we have that, have just been revitalized? Do we
Sounds
take
like,
everything down?
Very good lead into the next.
Yeah.
I'm hearing some priorities being discussed here.
I got one more comment. Your Honor, when you refer to world-class riverfront, are you referring just downtown, or are we talking about all 11 miles? Because there are different solutions in different parts of the riverfront. North of the Lock and Dam, we're constrained by the level of the Mississippi River by the dam. What we can do there to stop the flooding, it's all through the core tunnels. Down in the First Ward, where Nahant Marsh is, there are different opportunities down there to increase the size of the marsh and maybe have buyouts along South Concord that include all that as marshland.
Yeah.
And then there's other responsibilities between Howell Street and the Centennial Bridge that are in the Third Ward where Michelle's business is at, that may require different things because we filled the city dump up so high. So when this study goes forward, it's gonna have to look at these 11 miles and determine what's best for different sections of the river.
That's
I
a
have
great point
always
they pointed out.
supported a world-class riverfront downtown.
I think a world-class riverfront is one that people come from all over the world to see how we've dealt with all of it, which is gonna be a variety of options. And I think that's the issue, because a lot of people are watching us. I still hear from people around the world talking about how the parks took water in. Let's take that to the next level and find out how we can use all 9 or 11 miles of it. That's a world-class riverfront. It doesn't necessarily mean fancy amenities. It might mean a way we deal with the rivers. So, I don't want to cut into, go
If
ahead.
that's what you would like to see in this study, this is the next section. And this is your opportunity to lay that stuff out there for us. Okay? And we'll take a little bit longer on this one, because I think you need.
It says 11 miles, starting up around, the other side of
I think you're right. They're on the same page. I think you have to look at it area by area. About 16 different. There are some things that aren't totally different. Like where railroad tracks underneath the bridge, right? It's not a city issue there.
The city owns right away. So they can do whatever they want.
Right.
But it depends on who you ask.
Again, now this is
It's right.
I guess I never want to. When I say risk, somebody says 9 miles, to me that means all.
I remember during the 90s, floods in Buffalo.
I think it's probably just.
Stood and got with the border, but they shot you, stopped the train.
extension that goes
Not
up
going
over
back.
and then back up.
Probably not, but we need to consider what our actions are. No. There was a lot of questions from citizens.
I would expect that. But somebody, and I'm not saying I would put it one way or the other, but there are certain people that care less about this. And I think we also can't forget, everybody that's talking about down, when you constrain the form, it's upriver.
Which after 6 years, I don't know if we're gonna.
What's your thoughts on that?
What I like the party here in Iowa.
We're talking about priorities. What what are our priorities?
Yeah.
Play my. Well, I think to your current, you need to break down.
I would break the sewage treatment plant. That doesn't need to be part of the study, but it needs to be number one. You need to instruct, ask
It's kind of like the Chicago Park.
everything else should be
So
separate.
that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, is what's the price tag on something we're gonna ask, good part of that, we're all the road towards it.
Yeah.
And then, you know what I mean? Yeah, is that what we have, either party? Plus, those hubs that you're talking about, the water treatment plants, the power plant, they're not only protecting them.
Well, the decisions that were made
For some degree,
to
Buffalo,
elevate the riverfront
Leclerc, so
today,
it's just got a different levels.
otherwise the storm sewers ended at the north curve.
So that we
And
can,
then for
so we got,
projects during the Great
right
Depression,
down.
they break them all the way to where the existing walls are now. So now we're faced with new elevations. Second, Third Street, low areas. But yeah, but I would say we need to break the entire 11 miles up, and I would probably, knowing the distance, one would be from the eastern border, Wagonville 15. Because that's all effective. Yeah. The next section, section 2, would be from Lackawanna.
I agree, but to me, our number one priority needs to be treatment.
That would be
Everybody. All the residents have a problem. If we lose the treatment plant, it would take us well over a year to get back.
All right. What kind of mood are you in? Well, I'm gonna show you that. Oh, it's the latest Shmee. Ready? You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it.
But that was agree to it. They had to work nice to figure out a way to
Thanks.
story near the road.
That's what kind of mood you were in.
Right. I mean, we've already discovered, once you get the wall, you're still gonna have the soil. Where the drains. So we have to attack both of those at the same time. Then they have to be in sections. You attack the section that's approaching and then section below. So you're staying ahead of the flow, the current.
The city could own land and the county for the purpose of draining water.
Well, yeah, first thing.
And what I'm specific.
Once that cover those things that most are 67. I think that's four
Lower that, so the bridge.
I think that these priorities are finally chances study. But certainly your study would have to construction priorities.
Yeah, if it's raining up river on the water,
So maybe that's where it's putting in, infrastructure down to the floor. for drainage. It needs to be studied and fixed.
Yeah, that was
Even like the Black
Well,
Hawk.
Yeah, but so you
when I
got-
say fixed, I'm talking about where he cycles back into himself.
We don't need, no.
Yeah.
It's just not downtown.
No, that's
Black Hawk Creek was in there, it's a 13-foot renegades.
Yeah, that, things like that are a big problem. Black Hawk Creek is big enough, it's enough water to take huge pumps. You can have a flood on it at the same time the river was higher. It's a real problem.
Technically, they were doing a pretty good job.
Plan was done in 25, and that's all long-term. Was built for the plant.
Same thing, same thing. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. You know, Arian said, we're still working on it. We're still working on it.
Oh, that was hilarious. I said I would.
And, you know, obviously, that's important, but to what extent, you know.
I think it's the same thing every single time.
When this all happened, one of the things in the back of my mind is having stood down there,
You can get your signal.
having run away from the water, and then stood there, where that, and it's only about a half a mile. I was standing on the alley there.
But you don't have that problem.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, you know, we're basically on the corner of the old fire station. Standing there, not even needing water. And you look both directions and you think,
The way it's handled, most like areas, like you have all there's somebody who said that. Then you either
Well, I think once you build the whole, so I think I'll go through these.
finding area where you can store water, take, you know, heat out, or else that's
So
water.
you guys are trying
It's
to.
so big, it's pump everything directly over. It's really nice.
Yeah, this is because what are you at? 6?
Water, and then right, it's already stone.
That would take
We're right there.
So
So you want me to get this done early tomorrow?
So I think that comes.
Well, if we had enough funds, we
Teamwork. I've been,
but I've been, a lot of people, well, you know, stormwater, everything.
Yes, we are.
Usually, I think actually, original
well, not flood, let's talk about flood vents, because that's the problem, I think the building is,
I kind of want Gary to go a little
like
like.
my office.
big area.
That building,
Well, you would.
and not a store.
Like if they take it past the
Taking all of my
Downside, you also take the
So, like, what are your favorite food today?
river
Tell your
runs, so it's more of a consequence.
If this ever happens to me again, I think right now, I'm going to recovery costs for that. Crazy thing about that is, I'm still required.
And then after breaks, the second bar technique, it goes.
That's where.
No.
We're just gonna
Why should I say?
I probably would have just.
But I learned all about this.
By letting trail, flood. I don't know that I think
You got 4 staff.
that's where all the balance is the maintenance cost. Everything used today, maintain level. If you choose not to have any room, you can do it.
But he didn't get funds for that part.
Small areas.
You get from that, what they've done with the new construction, just in the old building.
That's why we're,
I have, that's pretty upgrade. And the new, it's gonna be.
Get something done, protect everyone.
Center did,
Oh, it's.
they filtered it.
I haven't put much, I
Because
haven't
they
taken
used
out.
our fly ash and we're measured fly
There's
ash.
20, they're
There's
fine.
another very small.
And they wetted it, and they raised their first floor above the 100-unit.
Protecting
Because they're in the,
lower than something.
I guess all I'm saying.
that's something else that you could manage the bases altogether, all of it.
Maybe that already goes into.
But, I also.
Okay, you'll have me, it's kind of fun.
Here's the problem. So let's say that we consider that and I expand the space between the two buildings. Well, that's no longer considered flood regulations. Now, all know some codes are just like the other. As an example, it's like that's probably, yeah. 2 years ago, I had, town building next door, we gutted the first floor. Banking space.
Yeah, it seems like you can do.
So I designed a connector, which, is gonna be above some of those. So that means fine.
So, yeah.
Then, because we were gonna have a hole these two walls. I did. I had controls. Yeah, well, guess what? It didn't matter. As soon as we got to go.
I mean, in some sense,
You wanted cold walls. Well, now, yeah, so now you're just pounding it. So then, so much for that. So, our desire. So, unless everybody gets together and start working.
It achieves the goals. It still is.
Oh.
That's a tall order too.
If you wanna work in it,
That you can tell, because he
Especially downtown, each block.
up to second.
And all of a sudden you're welcome in if you
And it's all back to the
We gotta fight for it. Stress out.
And so like,
Great, okay. All right, let's not pick on that table all the time. Let's spread the wealth. So would you start for us, please?
Okay, we got 6 priorities for the study. Basically, get something done, protect everyone, cheap enough to be affordable, protect the treatment plant, keep River Drive open, and be environmentally sustainable.
Okay, could I ask you to go back through those again for
Get something done,
okay?
protect everyone, cheap enough to be affordable, protect the treatment plant, keep River Drive open, and be environmentally sustainable.
Any comments from the table? Comments? Questions for clarification?
Can you explain that cheap enough to be affordable?
Not exactly. You want something though that you can afford to build and then operate and maintain. And so that may mean you have to settle for something less than perfect, but something that is affordable to the community. And what that is, I think, is yet to be determined.
So, for my clarification, are you talking about maybe you wanna see some options? You could do this for this price, or you could do this for this price, is that what you're alluding to? Or just anything they offer has to be?
Well, if anytime you do a study, you're gonna look at options and different alternatives and seek input from people on what goes on in each area. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that through the course of that process, you're gonna help determine, here's what people want, here's what it costs, where do you make the trade-offs to make the decision?
See, I would recommend some specificity in this. If you wanna see options, you should say, we wanna see options, right? If that's what you want this study to include, we need to make sure we say that. Okay? Any other questions for clarification? All right, thank you. Ann, please.
Okay, so, we said wastewater treatment plant is number one priority. But I know that that's kind of in the works already, anyway, discussions with that. But, so moving on, we talked about breaking down the riverfront, looking at different solutions, but to study the whole 11 miles, but knowing you're not gonna be doing the same thing for the entire 11 miles. So kind of broke it up into 4 sections, so looking at Bettendorf to Lottendam 15. Second section would be Lottendam 15 to the Centennial Bridge, so your downtown area. Third would be Centennial Bridge to Concord, and then 4th section would be Concord to the west border. We also said, as we said previous, River Drive, keeping it open would be higher priority, just to keep transportation open for not only just businesses in downtown, but across the whole city. That we need to look at it from a regional scale, to look at land upstream, how, what impacts could be to upstream, downstream, and then also in the future, so looking at, the land up to the Lopsy, how maybe that could get thought out, maybe some land flooded that could maybe help. But yeah, to look at it more holistically. Then also to include your historical buildings into the flood plan, to try to keep those buildings flood resistant so they can be part of it and stay here and not have to do anything with those buildings, so sort of kind of things.
So, primarily you're talking about looking at different sections,
Yeah.
not just.
One size does not fit all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I think we would add to it, and its options within
Yes.
each of those sectors.
Great. Also, just for some clarification, so both of you have talked about the treatment plan, right? This study that we're working on right now is going to be time consuming, right? Do you want to include that, the waste treatment facility, in the study? Or is that something for the next section? Is that something we can do?
Actually, we believe that enough is known about the waste treatment plant that staff should move on that now.
Okay, so I would encourage you to include that in the next conversation. Good. Great. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay.
All right, so the first thing we said is that the plan needs to be comprehensive and holistic, so all 11 miles, and then also considering how it fits in with the Mississippi River Basin and other folks who are affected. Also that it should be sectioned out, and that there should be a different plan for each section, and that for each section, all mitigation options should be on the table and considered. So that would include raising the land, buying out neighborhoods, raising buildings or raising buildings, taking them away, building building flood walls, expanding marshes, et cetera. Everything should be on the table for each section. And then we should get costs, number 4 was, we should get costs for each of those options. So here's what it would cost to implement this. Here are your 3 options for that section, or whatever. We also need to determine at what level. And so this was something we kept talking about, we've been talking about here at this table is, are you comfortable building to 24? Or do you build to 26? Or does that really scary 27.5-foot number need to be accounted for now? I'm not sure I know the answer, but I think that's an important question. And then we also basically said that the assets that we outlined in that first session, we still agree those are the assets that need to be protected. And so to what foot, and then to what foot level, and then what is the cost to protect those assets? Similar to the sections, we need to know, to keep River Drive open, yes, you could do that, here's the cost.
Great. Clarifier, Kyle, if you would, if we're talking about River Drive, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, the access to both of the bridges and the sewage treatment plant, are those the initial assets we're talking about, which in fact they extrapolate into, they're gonna save a lot of areas around those things as
Yeah,
well.
I believe that's what we call the Tier 1 assets.
Tier 1
yeah.
assets, okay,
So-
just wanted to clarify for maybe people in. Okay.
I had a clarifying question, it might be for Dennis, with the core. Is there a level at which you are, when somebody calls you to say, what level should we be protecting, do you have an answer for that? I heard somebody say last week, that was supposed to be sitting at my table, his advice was 100-year flood plus 3 feet.
The Corps doesn't have any official position on that. Usually, studies would look at it based on economic justification and what level would be economically justified. That would be the normal thing. In the past, there's been a lot of smart people who have recommended 500-year plus 3 feet as being appropriate for urban areas. 100-foot plus 3 foot is probably more common, but
100-year and 3 year.
3 feet of 100 years is kind of.
So the range would be between 100-year flood and 500-year flood plus.
Yeah.
That's kind of the range of,
Which is right around that 20.
What is that?
25 feet.
because right now our 100 year is at.
Well, the 100 years at 23?
23.1.
Oh, so 26 feet, yes, sorry.
So, yeah. It's 26.
But the question is, 50 years from now, what will the 100-year flood be?
Which is why they say 500.
32 feet, let's go.
Yeah, change the rules, sounds good.
Well, and then are we all in agreement with Jessica's table as far as in order to push the ball forward, should we just identify those sections?
Yeah, I've
If
asked,
they- I mean, is that where we can kind of take something away from this?
I think this would be, we could all take guesses at it, but I think there's probably scientific places where if you are evaluating the floodwater, you would say, this is where it actually ends. Like, I might say from the East Village to Oneida Landing, but if you look at where the floods happens, they might actually say, well, it's not quite at Oneida, it's like 2 blocks east of it, and that's where it should stop, because now something changes and your next section needs something different. So I don't think that we should say, these are the 5 sections. I think you would ask a professional to say, we believe there's 5 sections or 4 sections, what are they actually? And there should be different plans for each.
I think what we go forward with is the fact that we understand we can't have one size fits all, and let them come back with a plan for dividing this into manageable areas and coming with options to deal with it that way. I think that's probably, it's the same thing, but it's let them make the final decision, or give us recommendation, not a decision.
great, okay, perfect. Anything else? All right.
He writes really
Thank you.
little, so.
I did. All right, so in addition, we just said to cast a net far and wide, explore those innovative solutions with costs, modeling, impact, and funding sources. We talked about the sections of the river and the functionalities and looking at commonalities. We said, to explore the sewer wastewater improvements that are needed, so we're not just talking about flood from the river. We agreed with Mayor's question to start it off was, let's design a city that we can be proud of, so a world-class city with a world-class riverfront, and then design your flood-related designs or barriers around that plan. Have it be a long-range regional plan, so you can buy in public involvement, so that way it doesn't get wrapped up into politics or the cycle of elections. Seek some best practices from other communities, understand what they've done. And we kept talking about just the regional impact or input. So what we do in Davenport was likely to affect Buffalo, or could affect Bettendorf or Rock Island or the Rock Island Arsenal. So make sure that we're always considering the regional impact of our decisions.
I just wanted to stress too that Marion brought up a very good point, and what Paul had said too, is casting that wide net. I think what we had talked about here was really supporting that. The fact is, we're not the only city to face this, but that we might support that these innovative solutions, that we don't just go for the boring basics, but that we really make a plan for putting Davenport on the map in a holistic sense, and with these solutions, that we actually are a place where people come and say, how did you do that?
People want to come visit us next time. What I like is I heard a lot of common themes. That's good news to me. We're all kind of thinking generally the same things. So that's great. Appreciate that very much. I think those are going to be some valuable input to the study. As we mentioned, though, that's going to take a while. So now I'd like you to talk about some of the things that we would like to see done sooner than later. What are some things that we could be doing better or start doing while this study is being conducted?
Fred, if I may add, I think we've talked about this quite a bit in different groups. So what does that look like? You know, there's a certain thing about what we're already looking to do, the next level of flood protection. So let's try to do that and kind of summarize and tighten that down a little bit as we move forward. If something new comes up, great. But just maybe we're going to just be a matter of time.
Yeah,
what do you think about
this should go fairly quickly. Some of the things I heard was, of course, protecting the water treatment plant. I heard things throughout the sessions about improving our communication. So those are the kind of things I think this is your opportunity to list those.
And are these things that we should consider being outside of the study because we want to get them out
Yes.
quickly?
Yes.
We need to do something while this is evolving.
Yeah, okay.
Could be something that would contribute to this study, perhaps, too.
Okay.
Maybe a short run on this one, maybe
I think 5 or 6 short, making sure that the flood plan that we have.
Yeah, so it's about 5 minutes worth, okay.
Flood plan that's not get us to the next level, right, which is the 2x2, I think.
Exactly.
And even that, I mean, I was looking at this, flood, right? But, you know.
Yes, ma'am.
You can't, so I think really, whatever that plan is, make sure it's a neat plan to get us to the next level. I think, of course, if you're planning to do facility, and if there's any identified what the problem is. Basically, given our basic infrastructure operating.
Is there a graduation plan for downtown?
Probably not a lot. These probably go together.
So this is your expectation?
I think they're
I was just gonna bring up, I think the other biggie,
Hey, everybody.
and I deal with
Floor for the rest. Right, exactly.
subscribe to.
Well, I know.
See, they didn't have himself. Surely he's government.
But they carry people out of town. If there was evacuation, a code that goes out. A signal. So I think once you get people out there,
I can tell you, they have, they sent out a notice. We're having a meeting.
Yeah, for like that here now.
Some folks.
And the county will do each other Monday morning.
And like I said, one, like I said, no flood protection.
But they can access.
That's the part of it. And then also.
I can make it really
I was thinking more along the lines of.
But I do know, like down the west, like Guard, National Guard, City Coast.
Before you even start engineering, and if I'm like, oh, now instead of being four, like, I could
They are because we have issues. Our biggest threat is
Rain on the backside of the Based on
oh, yeah, yeah.
really big. It's a living incredible. It's not, you know, I'm on the.
And my understanding is they, Public Works has said, now, we don't what did we see that, what did we need to change? And that's every flood's different. Right. Now, you did this and you did right, you figure out, we did this. It's like change over time. It's good to go back and review everything. I noticed, so if it's, we did this, we had this problem. How do we address it next time? Make sure it's in the plan, so we know. And I believe it was done. You know, they're in the process.
Because everything. Common sense kind of. The land use.
Once you go to the design, that's
That's.
Well, no, unrelated, but I'm just saying, if that
Sure. So that's, would agree that this should not be one of those.
Oh, these are seven.
community input.
It's not like mid-range.
And obviously for that, keeping the flood plan, that's what gets the outside. Their spreadsheet of
Rental Plot City days ago, we had two buildings down on, you know, where the monument,
I would agree though, that, you know,
big obelisk, Civil War obelisk that they put in.
I watched
There were two buildings on either side, the swimming pool, and had a solar array. Yeah, there's no nonprofit. Basement. I mean, you know, you miss it. I mean.
Well, it wasn't that big. It wasn't that big.
so yes, just some common sense of that's the mission. Business owners, how do we keep them safe?
Over time, thanks for your flooding, those buildings have gone away. Retreat.
I think maybe now see
He's wrapped.
potential
RHT.
Okay, moving right
City
along.
limit to city limit.
Let's start with this table, please.
Okay.
All right, so as we said last time, moving on the wastewater treatment plant is, do that now. Make sure our flood plan will get us to the next level, but also, keep it as like a living, breathing document. Keep looking at it as things change, you know, something done now is not necessarily gonna be okay a couple of years from now, depending on what changes, around. Keep up with new flood fighting technologies, communicate, with everybody, you know, not only, you know, your experts, but, between the city, county, your public safety officials. He mentioned, you know, maybe getting something like a reverse 911 that just has people in the floodplain that, you know, that's a quick way to let people know that there's maybe an issue, or something to be aware of. And keeping your main infrastructure operational during any floods is gonna be something that should be done. And then, also to instill some common sense practices with public safety. As people walking around behind temporary protection and stuff. Anybody?
And what that means is, Channel 6 had people one Sunday that were walking along, that were not going to a business or anything down there. And if that wall had failed with the hundreds of people down there stargazing, that's where you gotta say, you can't let that be someplace where people just go view the river. We have the Sky Bridge for that. That needs to be below the alley. That needs to be off limits. It's keep access to the businesses that are open, but you just can't let people go down there willy-nilly. Dee Bremer used to have the police down there to escort people away from the temporary flood protection, and that's when we were building a dirt dike down there. So that was scary, watching people on TV just down there to talk.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, next please. You want to come back to me?
I was just writing from one to the other. So number one was a better protection of the sewer treatment plant. Communication of specifics of the flood plan. So at what foot level does this go up? Getting the information to people who would be affected by the flood, that the information they need to make decisions on how best to protect their property with their own resources. And then also specificity of the floodplain, and those were tied together. Is the plan very specific? And then are those specifics as much as they can be, because we realize some of that you don't give out, but you need to be able to give the information to the people who have assets that could be affected by the flood so they can make their own decisions. And then tying into that, there was good conversation about public information meetings. Part of that would be education. So what do levees do and what don't they do? What do the pumps do? If the levee were to break, Kathy had mentioned before she left that in Rock Island, in some places, there are watermarks of saying, you know, basically at a whatever foot flood, this is where the water would be in your neighborhood. What does that do for you? Well, it gives you more information to plan and do the what ifs in your head. Number 5 would be, we need to look at a way to keep River Drive open from Bettendorf to 4th Street as an interim one. Understanding that if we wanted to keep River Drive open in its entirety, that's very expensive. That needs to be a part of the comprehensive plan. But potentially you could keep access all the way across Davenport if you can keep River Drive open to 4th Street. And then our current flood plan, we need to fill in more information for plus 23 feet. So as you go up in feet on our current flood plan, there's less and less detail to it. A lot of that is because there's more unknowns, but potentially we need to do some risk analysis and think through these things at greater than 23 feet and have some more detail in place at plus 23. And then we didn't really talk about this, and it's already been said by, our group didn't talk about this, I wrote this down, and the staff has already said, yes, we've heard this, it's going to be implemented, is that basically the HESCO strategy that the Corps' report came out and said, here's how we would suggest doing the HESCO strategy in the future. That should be adopted and implemented, and I think our staff's already said it's going to be.
Great. Comments, questions?
Yeah, and just to just kind of add into that, I think from Bettendorf to 4th Street, there were only a few points of vulnerability. It's not like the entire area is flooded out. There's only a few points that I feel like if those are addressed, that'll really keep that traffic moving through. And from the point about just communication and specificity of flood plan, from a business perspective, what I would love to see is for Tim at Front Street is, okay, at 18 feet, the HESCO gets double, or maybe there's a certain amount of footage where we put the HESCO in period, that he can watch the forecast and he can say, okay, it hit this point, I know what to expect, and if that doesn't come, then he can go to his alderman or the mayor and say, why hasn't this been followed through with? I think that's what the peace of mind and confidence for people who are investing in our downtown in that floodplain, I think that's the least we could do for them.
Okay, next please.
Let's see here, we talked about transportation routes, so to piggyback on keeping River Drive open to 4th Street, what are some alternative routes that we need to keep open? Keep traffic flowing, so I put down 2 ways, possibly, so that way 4th Street and 3rd Street, I can come 2 ways. We talked about a marketing strategy for the Quad Cities, that even when we have water, that we're still open, so that way we don't get calls from Timbuktu that asks if we're all underwater. A project sustainment plan, knowing that this is going to be a multi-year strategy, how do we make sure that we create a plan to sustain this? And that means talk openly about the key issues, deliverables, dates, progress, what to do when there's turnovers or challenges or naysayers or the key proponents go away. What do we do to make sure that this happens? Identify key staff people who are advancing the plan. We said key staff people, so that way there's not a single point of failure, just having that one person. And then we agreed with the what if scenario, what if it gets to 25 or 27 feet so the plan is known and people can plan in advance. We questioned whether or not we have a citywide flood or crisis communication system in place. How do we keep everybody by text or alert notified that something is happening? And and we agreed with the new HESCO plan, hire the expert, and protect the sewer plant.
Is that it?
I think Timbuktu is the only place I didn't get a call from.
Good. Comments, questions? Okay, thank you. And John?
Pretty similar to what everyone else had. Update the flood response plan, including an evacuation plan, protect the treatment plant, and educate the public about flood risk and also opportunities for a world-class riverfront.
Make sure they're integrated. Good, thank you very much. Again, a lot of commonality, which is good. All right, we're gonna make a little switch. We're gonna switch 4 and 5. We thought maybe it's good to have a discussion about the timetable and the potential steps and how this study's gonna move forward, and the chronology associated with that. And then we'll end up with our expectations moving forward, okay? So, with that,
I've asked Corey to come in, because some of this is relationship to what happens with the aldermen, with the council at large, what happens with, obviously, the city staff, what's the way we would move forward with some of these initiatives. So before we talk about expectations, let's talk about what it is, really, the legal, procedural way certain things have to happen, and then we can talk about expectations on top of that, so please.
So if you've ever looked at a city council agenda, you'll see lots of plans, scopes, specs, all that kind of stuff. Staff really doesn't need permission or direction from the council to prepare a scope of work and hire a consultant. Usually it falls within our work plan. So I think we as the staff understand that securing expertise is our next step. I think we came to that realization a while ago. But while we could just sketch out a scope of work, having this feedback is incredibly helpful as we develop the scope of services or the scope of work. So we'll take what the staff has kind of sketched out along with your feedback about what are those priorities, what are the, how do we dissect this into areas of the city using innovation, all of those different things so that we can make sure we have the right proposal from the right firms to ultimately guide us through that. A study of this nature is probably years in the making realistically with lots of feedback points along the way. Council staff, you guys as a group coming back to kind of check and balance the work they're doing. But there's a lot of math and a lot of engineering that goes into this. So I think from a staff perspective, our next step after we get the feedback back from you all, and Tiffany's been taking copious notes, would be to integrate that into a scope of work that we'd prepare. I would expect we'll check in with the council and the mayor on a Tuesday before we would release it, or however we're gonna acquire consulting services. By state law, we don't have to do an RFP. We could just go hire a firm. So I don't know exactly which way we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna try to be as expeditious and get the best team we can. So I can't give you that exact plan right now. But then, there's, Nicole or Clay, feel free to add in, there's months of work, probably field work, looking at old historical information we have from real floods, from plans, from different engineering projects that we've done with the sewer system, the road systems, all of that. We have a lot of data that they can dig into, and then looking at, is the number 26, is it 28? And what does that take? Because as we've been looking, you might see 6 or 8 feet above ground if it's a permanent solution, but then there's 60 feet below ground that has to go into that analysis. So there's a ton of work, and that should be done in conjunction with a lot of public feedback. So I think that's where we're at.
And I think if I may, Corey, I think the other side, then before we actually move forward, that's when the council would authorize expenditure.
Well, we would bring the contract itself. So my purchasing authority is up to $50,000. This will cost substantially more than that. So the council would actually approve the contract with the firm. So that would be the one thing you would see on an agenda where the council would be affirming a step in this process. Not
And
that
also
we would
there's,
keep them
I'm sorry, I
updated the
didn't
way.
interrupt, but there is a lot of relatively recent, in some cases, studies that have been done. All of that will be brought together for the eventual group that you hire.
We have a lot of institutional knowledge from a lot of different projects over the years that will turn over to whatever firm gets selected.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but the other ones that have been brought up, and Dennis, you probably know, and others, maybe Ray as well. This is the same procedure that was used in the other cities that we're talking about. They find the top consultants, bring them in to do the work, and then
And it's probably a consulting team. I mean, there are firms that joint venture with other firms who have specialties in hydrology, or, you know, we have a unique situation in how our river works here compared to coastal flooding, by example, so.
yeah, and I think that the reality is what we heard here is very, very, very helpful. What has come out of this, because all of that will be built into that when you go out and try to get somebody. All of these things have to be included in this, and we'll all get to see it. All the aldermen get to see that when the contract comes out as well, and you'll have a chance to get feedbacks along the way as well. That I think that was one of the concerns, that we're taking all of this in and making it broad enough of a scope to be able to do all the things that we wanted to do to come back with the recommendations. Any questions of Corey? I get, yeah, go ahead.
Just a, heard what you were saying there. Is your thought the best approach is an RFP, or is your thought the best approach give staff the opportunity to go and get to make those contracts?
We haven't talked extensively about it. There are only a few firms in the country that do this really, really well, or partner with those. So I mean, realistically, could you have a local firm that partners with an international leader? Probably. But there, you know, there are only so many CH2M Hills et al. who do this on an international scale. And I think with the magnitude we're looking at, having that level of expertise and innovation is going to be important for our future.
I also, Michelle, I think when we talk about international scale, it's important. That's not just a highlight thing. We're talking about an international issue, and I don't mean that in the sense that we need that kind of expertise to do the depth and breadth of the project like this. You know, we don't want somebody that's done a creek somewhere. This is very complicated, and we want some people that can demonstrate that they have done this, and we'd like to hear somebody that's done them at this magnitude, because we're talking about, as you've all identified, 11 miles of activity, and how do we take it all into consideration, so.
I don't
So
know.
that would involve entertaining proposals from maybe 3 of those particular internationally known folks to hear what their ideas might be before contract is led. Is that how that works?
We can do direct call, we can do an RFP. Sometimes when we do an RFP, we don't get the firms that we really want. And so because this is such a specialized area of study, I think we know the handful of firms in the country that have also international expertise that could do this. And, you know, either way is fine. If you guys have a preference, we definitely take that feedback.
Would you consider an international firm from another country? Because after the flood in New Orleans, there was a firm from the Netherlands, which they deal with water every day, that offered solutions to New Orleans on their flood mitigation programs.
I think the question comes down about, Michelle, about what they're gonna do. The challenge is, there's a lot of, we wouldn't want somebody to come in and tell us without doing all the research first of here's what we think will work, because they gotta do all the work. So that's a tremendous amount of investment, and we need to get the right people involved with that, so. Any other questions? Yeah.
One thing that you've given us a lot of information. I think one aspect we haven't touched on is how this thing eventually gets paid for. And I think a lot of I mean, if you understand the city budget, I mean, $100 million project, I mean, that's
5 years of streets.
Yeah, that's 3.5 years of our entire capital improvement budget. So to execute something like this, a comprehensive flood plan, we'd be looking at a lot of state and federal dollars. And so you don't have to answer that now, but I think at some point there's some education that needs to go on, and what we can do from a city standpoint and what we would expect from who are the federal partners, what options are out there, how long would it take to fund it.
And I think that's the important part of having a plan that looks at the diversity of our riverfront and looks at an alternative of options, because, you know, we have a presidential election coming up and the administration is gonna change, it always does, you know, we're different staff. So knowing at the federal level what types of programs are out there, and you guys have talked right now, mitigation through removal of assets is currently how FEMA views their role, that may change. So I think we need to be very strategic in how we build out this plan to acquire the best opportunity for partnership funding that we can.
One other one, Kyle, I know we've talked about it in the court as well. There may be different streams of funding for different areas along the river. So it's not like we need X amount of dollars to do it all. There might be a lot of funding for this section, and as that's available, we use that. Different funding over here, different type of investment over here, and it's a matter of being open to all of those different opportunities.
So potentially, within that study, part of the study is you break out, here are the funding opportunities for each portion of the plan.
And those may evolve as well, as time, funding opportunities may evolve.
I'm sharing with my table, so I'll share with the whole group. Talking with my colleagues in Cedar Rapids last week, they had $700 million worth of projects identified to protect their 7.5 miles of riverfront. They just got their last piece, which was the largest funding, and it was from the federal government. It took 10 years to get that piece.
And that was the water control, wasn't it?
Yep, and it was, so they prioritized local government. The city invested a lot first to boost confidence, that then resulted in private investment. They've had $1.4 billion of private investment in their downtowns over the last decade. So 7.5 miles of riverfront, $700 million of local, state, federal investment for $1.4 billion of private investment. So I know that we can do something similar and something just as grand. But it's gonna take a while, and we're gonna have to have those partners in place.
And that's why the comments you made about the interim steps are extremely important. We can't just say, oh my God, it's too much money, we're just gonna sit here. We've got a good solid, I think with all of you echoed, a good solid next steps along the way to make sure we're okay to keep moving along until we get to the point of being able to put the project together. So I guess maybe just to ask the last question before, I know we're out of time, but are there any other any other expectations you have at this point? I think, first of all, I want to thank everybody. This has been a tremendous amount of positive, not positive alone, but very insightful recommendations that have been made by everybody around. This is a very, very good process. I feel really good about it. So thank you for your time. But what are there any expectations? We want to help, at the end you want to say, we want to manage what you expect happening the next steps. I think we've said it, we're going to move forward, but any other expectation items that you want to say? Yeah, Mary?
Well, I guess, and this may be unclear right now, because I know we're, I hear that we're moving forward, but what would the expectations of this task force be going forward? Would it be reconvening, when the firm is found, or, I think that's a question people would have around the table.
I would suggest that I've heard from a number of people that ongoing communication is extremely important. So it may be, but on the same note, and I heard from a lot of people earlier, we don't want to meet just to meet, say it's time we get together again. So I would just say, as those landmark decisions are made, or at least sectional decisions are made, that we then know to reconvene. But I would say we keep the communication going as an ongoing process. Here's how we're doing, and that, formalizing that in some way, not necessarily have the meeting, but how we doing, I think we heard a lot of questions. You want to know what is the height that this goes up, and what are some communication issues going? As part of that, the next steps can be shared along the way.
And I think the exception would be only, and I understand it not being specific, but I think, this, one of the questions, which was, what do we want, what we were doing in the interim, and what is our interim to-do list? Interim could be this winter, a flood. So
Yeah.
I would say within the next few months, we should put a pin in sort of getting back together and where are we on this, because that's something that immediately impacts, it potentially immediately impacts our city. And I'm not trying to rush anything, but I feel like we should have a plan in a couple of months, I don't know what the time is, that we're back looking at, okay, we talked about interim things, and this is, does that make sense?
So what does that look like to all of you? Make sense? I think how are the intermediate steps unfolding?
Exactly, yeah.
And then subsequently, where are we in the other process? And that makes a lot of sense.
We talked about a lot about the project sustainment. That was sort of my pet thing here, make sure that this continues to move forward and it doesn't suffer from either staff turnover or council turnover or mayoral turnover or just turnover in the community, right? I think that one of the keys to that is identifying what those challenges might be and brainstorming solutions. I think that's something that this group could probably give valuable insight to. We've got a broad-based cross-section of your community here, and I think that's a topic that we can certainly talk about here and help you devise a plan or strategy going forward. Just a
I guess just to add a little bit into it too, and once the consultant is on board, and you take a look at their milestones, they'll provide, a synopsis of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and that'll feed into the decision making when it would be a good point for us. But
I think sharing with the group of what those milestones are.
yes, definitely.
And then that's a good time to check in when they deliver this or deliver that.
The task force can do two things. The task force can give input toward the decision-making, and a task force can lend credibility to the decisions that are being made. And so if I'm very much encouraged by the group that we have here, I believe that we're very representative, and recognize that a group like that can assist in moving forward for one or both of those things.
I would just caution there, I agree, but I would just caution, one of the things that I've had to learn is how much I don't know. So it's a matter of milestones along the way are one thing, but giving input as to what they should be doing may be something different. And I think that needs to be sorted out as we move forward, because I think we all found out how much we did know from the first meeting to this one. I would think that's just a scintilla of what we don't know yet. So I think that's important to build that in of how we move forward. But I think transparency and openness about the process is something that definitely needs to be continued. Yeah.
I have a point of clarification, and it's probably to you, Corey, as you're moving forward with your consulting relationship. We talked about the different aspects of the riverfront and the 9 or 11 miles, I don't know what number it is now. 13. As you move forward, are you going to include those 9 or 11 miles as the subject area or the scope for their consideration?
I think staff views the riverfront as the entirety of the city of Davenport's frontage.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or any other comments anybody wants to make? Please feel free. Again, I can't thank you all enough. This was a very diverse group of people coming from different positions. We were able to bring in a lot of additional experts that came in and gave us information. I think I had talking to many of you individually, heard so much about, geez, I didn't know that, but boy, I learned a lot about that, as an example. So, and all of you, thank you very much. There's a few, this is almost the entire original group. We've seen more people, but they came in for specialty sections. So I want to thank you all for that involvement, and we'll continue this information. Those sheets that you had, please turn those into Tiffany with the summary on them, because that'll be very helpful as those are summarized then, and I know Corey and the staff will use those to help determine what the next steps are. Thank you, thank you, thank you.